for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She's a mom, a coach, and a yogi for sure, and ceremonialist, no other than Miss Michelle Oelking.
Hi, Daniel.
Welcome to Book 101, Miss Michelle, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yes, thank you for having me. I am a ICF professional certified coach. I wear many hats, as you just mentioned. Primarily work in guiding neurodivergent women out of chronic overwhelm, and I've practiced at the intersection of ADHD and trauma for the last 25 years.
Miss Michelle Alking, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today, let's talk about Beyond the Hustle, deconstructing the girl boss myth and the true roots of female burnout. And how would you expound this topic for today?
Mhm. So I mentioned I work with neurodivergent women primarily, and there's some data to support that women or people with ADHD or other forms of neurodivergence tend to experience burnout at a higher rate. The way that I look at this challenge is both from an individual and a systemic lens. So, individually, we know that neurobiological aspects like challenges with executive functioning and emotional regulation are uh, sort of interplaying. But because I have a social work background, I have a master's in social work, I do look at systems. And so the way that I discuss female burnout, it's not about personal failing or issues with time management. Um, there are systemic factors, like I said. So this really is going beyond the individualistic approach and looking at unsustainable and often flawed structural systems that don't support the ways in which women need to be productive and be able to flourish in the modern day workplace.
So, what inspired you to explore the myth of the girl boss and its connection to female burnout?
Oh gosh. Well, I'm sure like many people that you have interviewed or folks that are on the path of transformation, it was my own journey. Um, I have always been high achieving. I've always been, the good student, the the child who was quiet, who did well academically, who performed, and I internalized that into my adulthood. And after being late diagnosed with ADHD in my 30s, I really took stride and passion in working with this population and had a lot of success early on in my career. And I'll share a story that I was really just deep in hustling and grinding it out and sacrificed my own health as a result. And in the same year, I received wonderful recognition. And I was living in New Orleans at the time. I received this award. It was a 40 under 40 award, and simultaneously was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. So, through that process of reconciling burnout for myself, what contributed to it, again, both individual and environmental factors, I became really committed to working with women in the same way.
In your view, did the girl boss culture organically emerge, or why did it gain so much traction?
Mhm. Well, I remember looking back, I I believe it was around 2013. You may recall there was a book that came out by Sheryl Sandberg called Lean In, and it was really asking women to grab a seat at the table, to lean in just as male counterparts were doing. And that, I believe, in my opinion, that was sort of the start of defining a more specific and narrow script, a cultural script for success, because it mirrored the existing, what I believe is still in place, a lot of the patriarchal, masculine corporate norms, and implicitly asked women to adapt to this system. It was not necessarily built for us in the ways that we need that support. And I think a systemic blind spot is taking into account that this model, in terms of trying to overcome systemic barriers, like lack of affordable childcare or paid parental leave, the gender pay gap, all of these were resting on the shoulders of individual women. And I think that this approach, it does primarily work for women who have more privilege, who have the ability to outsource or delegate responsibilities and tasks because they have more financial opportunity. It does ignore the reality of a large majority of women who, like I said, can't afford to outsource that invisible labor of the household or childcare or the mental load. Um, and it eventually, that lean in philosophy or framework gave way to sort of the girl boss, uh, idea of, giving it your all, giving it 100%, hustling and grinding, kind of stemming from like the superwoman idea of we have to do it all, we have to do it all at 100%. And what I've seen is it really leads to unrealistic expectations, to a lot of isolation and shame and guilt with women who feel like they can't keep up. And especially with neurodivergent women, there are already challenges with organizing and time management and energy management. There tends to be this sort of go, go, go crash cycle. And that's what we call burnout, like hustle, hustle, hustle. And then the crash and burn that happens.
Miss Michelle, what are some of the most harmful messages perpetuated by hostile culture targeted at women?
Hmm. Yeah, that's such a great question. Um, I even see this. I've done work for about 10 years doing leadership consulting and coaching in corporate and tech. And I see this across many, many different layers of management and leadership, of this idea that, and don't get me wrong, in no way am I minimizing feminism or I'm blaming feminism, but what I think a byproduct of what's happening is this idea, like, we can't complain, we can't sort of challenge the status quo, because we should be grateful for being able to have a seat at the table, for being able to have our voices be heard, to be witnessed. And so, whether it's implicit, I think a lot of times it is implicit. Uh, I think the sort of toxic positivity culture that's has come out in corporate, there's a lot of what I would call pseudo mindset work, where it doesn't often provide space for people to talk about the real challenges. And there's sort of a bypassing of experiences. So, to answer your question, I think a lot of times these messages are more subtext or more implicit. They're not necessarily coming out as overtly, but they're there.
Do you think the girl boss narrative was ever empowering or was it always flawed? Why
Mm,
or why not?
yes. I don't think it was always flawed. I don't. But again, I think this also connects to when we think about the variations in social in class structure and cultural norms, and the fact that really with I think is a big challenge in these sort of individualistic mantra, so to speak, is we're missing community, we're missing our tribe. So women don't have many of us, like we don't have extended family around to support the child rearing, all of the aspects that women have historically in different cultures and in different indigenous groups, pre-industrialization even, been afforded the opportunity to have support from other women. And that's not something that exists in many places. And in fact, I think since COVID, the level of disconnection, we know this, there's data to support that, has risen. And so disconnection, when we are wired for connection as humans, biologically, we're meant to live and work and experience life together in deep connection. And that is structurally and systemically one of the aspects that are contributing to feeling this sense of isolation, this sense of, lack of support, the fear, the shame, the guilt that I mentioned as well.
How does capitalism play a role in sustaining the myth of the girl boss?
Mhm. Right. So, the structures that we have in place, and know this can be controversial because I am talking about differences in biology. But when we think about those genetic differences in terms of hormonal cycles between men and women, there are different points in the menstrual calendar or the hormonal calendar where women do need rest and need more support. This idea that we're going to grind it out 24/7 is just, it's not realistic. It's not sustainable. I don't think it's sustainable for men either. I mean, I'm talking about women here, but burnout is a real thing that we have seen in the last several years, being on the rise again. And so we think about how sort of the productivity um, index, or the ways in which corporate has structured. um, let me back up and say too, with globalization and the way companies are working across the globe, this idea of being on all the time is even harder. Even though folks have the ability to work asynchronously or remotely, you might be operating, say, in the Bay Area, and your counterparts across the world are working. It's harder to shut off, I think, is what we're seeing. I in my clients too, this idea that they're checking emails in the middle of the night, or they're waking up to Slack messages. There's really no turning off in today's world. Again, because we're not just working within a 9 to 5 time frame.
Ms. Michelle, what are some common signs of a burnout among women that often go unnoticed or maybe not
Mhm.
minimize?
Yes, that's a great question. Well, from a nervous system standpoint, which is the work that I do, is a very foundational to working with people to heal. Burnout is a mobilization, right? It is when chronic stress and the impact of even trauma has resulted in the body and the brain and the nervous system going into protection mode. So, what that can look like, well, we see it could feel like numbness, it can look like depression, it immobilization in many ways is shutting down. So there can be a numbing of emotions, a numbing of feelings, physical. impact. We often see clients who, like I said, may even develop autoimmune conditions or experience migraines, a multitude of physical factors. But the thoughts and beliefs that coincide with that state tend to be things like I'm not good enough, I can't do this anymore, I have no interest in X, Y, or Z, nothing matters. It's a very hopeless state.
Hmm. Interesting. Miss Michelle, as a mom, as a coach, yogi, and a ceremonialist, what are your short term and long term goals?
Oh, wow. Okay. Short term goals. I am working right now in my launch of a new group program. It's called Portal the Overwhelmed to Ease Method. So I'm building community and connection with other women who are dealing with chronic stress and chronic overwhelm in that space. I am a little bit longer term working on a book. I'm really excited for that. And it is called You Are More Than Your Diagnosis. I longer term in life, I live in beautiful Colorado where I spend a lot of time outside doing all the adventures. So my daughter will be preparing to go to college in the next couple of years, and I plan to do a lot of travel within the U.S., outside of the U.S., and continue to support women in this space.
Good luck to your goals, Miss Michelle, and looking forward for more success. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there want to be like you?
Hmm. I I would invite listeners to start leaning out, to start taking space, really setting boundaries, finding other peers, friends, family that support these shifts because these aren't easy shifts to make, Daniel. The work is not easy. I know that, and but it's so worth it. It is so worth it. So that's what I would say is find people who know that you can make these changes even within the systemic challenges that I've been talking about. It is possible to reclaim your vitality and to be in a place of truly flourishing.
Truly, truly flourishing indeed. And Miss Michelle, can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Yes, I connected to this conversation. I love Energy Leadership by Bruce Schneider. And it's an amazing book about managing energy in the workplace and in life. I always think about energy management over time management. And I think it's an amazing book. Have everyone check it out.
Yes, people, check it out, and read it, and for sure you will empower. And thank you for that recommended book, Miss Michelle. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, my other podcast. Because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101 in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101 and mental health 101 love letters in third season, and movie 101 review and music 101 in its fourth season, and science 101 and sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Michelle, what some personal strategies or practices that have helped you or others recover from burnout?
Mm, yes. Like I said, leaning out. So, a big part of it is building safety in the nervous system to rest. And it's very counterintuitive. I know it's not easy, especially for people who are go, 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 very high achieving. Building places of rest, time in nature, nourishing your physical well being, your mental and emotional flourishing, spiritual growth, whatever that looks like. That doesn't have to be religion, but for many people, it is time in nature, and connection and community. And those are really the pillars that I work within when I'm working with clients. It's what helped me to transform from my own burnout, Daniel.
And what the final message would you like to leave with women who are tired, delusion, and questioning the hustle narrative?
Hmm. Well, I think if you're questioning the narrative, then there's something there intuitively that you're picking up on. And I would say to continue to listen to that inner voice, to that inner knowing, that inner wisdom, because you feel broken in that state. And really, I believe that we're all innately wise, resourceful, capable, and whole.
Hmm. Miss Michelle Alking, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Thank you for empowering women all over the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Thank you so much, Daniel, for having me on this show. It was a pleasure. And yes, please check out my website at souljourncoach.com. And I would love to chat. So reach out. I'm on LinkedIn, Substack, and Instagram as well.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Michelle Alking because if you support her, for sure, more and more and more advocacy to empower women all over the world. So, Miss Michelle, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.